Your spirit may fly away, and your body may be broken. Your lips, they may not speak, for some things cannot be spoken. But time will not forget about the price you had to pay for the greed of men who did not respect the woman, the Congolese woman, oh the woman. They hurt your body and your mind, and they take away your land. They take away your jobs, put guns in your enemies' hands. How many more must die before the whole world pays for the telling of the lies, the killings and the rape of the woman, the Congolese woman? You dry your eyes and you keep it going. Pull yourself up with your own strong hand, strong and ever reaching for the sky. That is a woman. Your spirit may fly away, and your body may be broken. Your lips, they may not speak, for some things cannot be spoken. But time will not forget about the price you had to pay for the greed of men who did not respect the woman, oh, the Congolese woman, the woman, oh, the woman.
Hello and welcome to HMG Network, broadcasting live from the greater Washington, D.C. metropolitan. My name is Freeman Singirankabo, and thank you for joining us for another power-packed message of In Pursuit of Justice. Today, we are going to be discussing unrecognized genocide for Burma, Rohingya, and the Congo. And our moderator for today is going to be Cllaude Gatebuke, who is the executive director for the African Great Lakes Action Network, or AGLAN. And I'd like to check in to see if Cllaude can hear us. Cllaude, good morning, buddy. How are you?
Good morning, Freeman. I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Man, doing fantastic, Cllaude. Please take it away. All yours, all yours.
Thank you so much, Freeman, and thank you to HMG Network for hosting us again on this powerful conversation. We've been talking about this conversation for a long time, so it's a great honor to be with both my friends, my family, my fellow activists, my people who are doing amazing work in the world in two totally separate parts of the world, but united by the common humanity of doing and promoting humanity, making the world a better place. And this is none other than Brother Kambale Musavuli and Sister Myra Dahgaypaw, whom I have known for a long time. So this conversation is going to be, it's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. It's not going to be as formal as you usually see it. But before we start, I wanted to recognize our sponsors, starting with HMG Network and the affiliates. So greetings to all of you watching on your local televisions, and also to those of you watching via social media, YouTube and Facebook. And I'll ask that not only do you share these links with your networks, that we also invite you to take a part in the conversation, ask questions, and talk about these issues, and interact with our panelists today. So please do share on all of your networks, and send your questions and comments. We're looking forward to interacting with you. The other thing that I would like to recognize beyond the local affiliates in HMG network itself are the other sponsors. Black Star News, thank you for your sponsorship. Friends of the Congo, and AGLAN, the African Great Lakes Action Network. So I'm not going to go into a long introduction. Really want to start by inviting both, starting with Kambale to greet our audience, and then we'll go ahead and start with the conversation after Myra greets the audience.
Thank you, Cllaude. It's always an honor to be with you. Looking forward to learn from all of us. We are in May 2021. The war in the Congo has taken over 2 decades. People have died in millions. But what gives me the hope, right, the conviction that this will end, is every day as we continue this work, we continue to see people who are coming to say the killing in the Congo has to end. There is the human aspect to it. When we speak to people about what's happening in DRC, they want to do something. I remember years ago when I met Myra, I think it was around when there was the activity at the mall for genocide. You know, there were bones.
Yes.
Being
1 million bones.
Exactly.
And Myra, you remember that project also?
Right. So as I remember I don't know if I should call it the courage, but the human spirit that people, no matter the context of the conflict, they knew that it wasn't right for others to die because of who they were or because of a political context. And that's what's bringing us together to look at issues. What is happening in Congo? What's happening in Burma? What's happening in Rwanda? And how collectively, as human beings, we can address it. My perspective has always been, in order for the situation in the Congo to end, there need to be a global movement, just as they did 100 years ago when people came together to stop King Leopold. Today is the same. You know, Che Guevara said it best. The Congo's problem is a world problem, right? It's going to take the world to come together. We continue to struggle in DRC. We look forward to the solidarity. And as I always say, Cllaude, looking forward to the time where you will be on the Congo River with me, and I will be in the Mille Collines in Kigali with you in a peaceful region where we can each other.
We have our appointment. It's in July, and in the upcoming years, on your birthday, I remember, and we're gonna make it happen before that birthday comes. And so, Myra, just wanted to invite you real quickly to greet the audience also, and then we'll start with you.
Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, this is the moment that I think I'm so excited and have been waiting for, and finally it's here. So I totally agree that we share humanity. Yes, Congo and Burma, we are like, what, thousands miles apart. But look, the people we are, who we are, and the people we are working with, and the people we're trying to make a difference for, their suffering is pretty much more or less the same. It's just because of different parts of the world, and then the intensity, the way the persecution, the way the human rights abuses has been carried out might be different. But the bottom line, I guess, to echo my brother's statements, the most important thing is we share humanity, and we are in this fight together, and we just have to fight for each other to make the world a better place. And we'll continue doing that until, I guess, our last breath, I guess. If we get to our aim earlier than our last breath, of course, that's something that we'd like to see. Otherwise, we just have to keep fighting. And I just wanted to tell those who might be watching and suffering at this moment, your voice is not going to go in vain, and we'll try and make it heard in any way we can.
All right. Well, thank you, Myra. I wanted to start with you, actually, and just wanted for you to share a little bit, just quickly, your story of, because, you know, these things happen to human beings. I survived the Rwandan genocide, survived the atrocities, thank goodness, in Rwanda, and also survived the bombing in Congo. And, you know, it was very close, many times. And I just want you to just share a little bit as we get into this, so that people know that these things happen to human beings, not only on the continent in Africa, but also in Asia and in your part of the world, and why we do this work. And then we'll get into some of the specific issues on the Rohingya genocide, and also the genocide in Congo and the ongoing atrocities in both places, in the Congo and in Burma, which, of course, the ongoing atrocities in the Congo have a lot to do with Rwanda, which is where I am from. And I can talk about that also. But why don't you just share a little bit of your story?
Okay. So my name is Myra Dahgaypaw, and I was born as an internally displaced person, which means that I have homes, I have village, that where I'm supposed to be able to live peacefully, but of course I didn't get to live in my own house. Instead, I had to flee for lives in jungle. That's why we call it internally displaced. And in my own Karen state, I came from a Karen ethnic group in eastern Burma, which bordering with Thailand. So I have a first-hand experience where being an internally displaced person, what that feels is that the Burmese military, the Burmese troops came to our village, burned down our houses, rape our women, pretty much like what's happening your side of the world too, in Africa, pretty much, almost the countries that I know. And so that's why my family and I was a very young child back then, younger than 5. So I remember some, but not a lot, where we literally had to jump off from the house, fled for life. And there were times when I remember we had to sleep on the ground, and it was a raining season. There was a little plastic tarp for me, but then we were so poor that the plastic tarp wasn't even big enough to cover my little body. So part of my body was in the rain. And there were times when we were like starving. We barely had food to eat. And of course, if we were home, we would have enough. But of course, we were in the jungle fleeing for life. So I was the youngest. I get to eat alone, but not the rest of my family. And also there were times when I didn't have the right to cry, because if I cried, then the Burmese troops will find out our whereabouts, will come and kill all of us. So, I mean, thinking about a child doesn't even have a right to cry, that is pretty intense. And of course, I saw a lot of people killed. I didn't have to dig my own grave like Cllaude, but I saw a lot of people were killed, even including my classmates, my own family members, my parents. And my youngest aunt, she was gang raped, and badly tortured. She was like hanging upside down, was tortured in order for the Burmese troops to get the information about their enemies, which is our side of troops that fight to protect us. And also her husband, he was tortured by, his skin was sliding in small strips, like you're going to make some dry meat, and then you slide the skin, you marinate it with salt and chili. That's how he was tortured in order to be able to get the information out of him. And finally, he was stabbed and he was bled to die. So this is the story that I have, but that doesn't mean that my story is a unique one. You have hundreds of thousands of people in Burma and in Rwanda, as well as in Congo. So these is the reasons why it makes me feel as though I am here in America and I'm so privileged comparing to them. And that is why, as I share this word and as I share this humanity, it is also partly my responsibility to making sure that I do what I can. I help raise awareness. Because whatever we're talking right now today, nobody will come out and chase me and gun me down and kill me or torture me or rape me. But those on the grounds, they are the ones who have to fear for lives in order to speak out. But they are so brave, they're so courageous, and they still speak out. So if I don't do it, then what am I doing here? And that leads to where I'm doing what I'm doing.
Thank you, Myra, for sharing. I feel like I'm hearing my own story when I'm listening to you. And I've heard it many times. It always seems like it's brand new, and it moves me. But the more, everything you say there are things that I've seen, things that I've lived, things that that I know people not only have lived, as you say, it's happening now. I know that it's happening in the Congo, and wanted to bring Kambale into the conversation on, just connecting the dots between all of what's happening now, and also share what's going on in the Congo a little bit right now, because we also want people to learn both what's happening in the Congo and what's happening in Burma and what's happening to the Rohingya people, but also just widely the Burmese people. Could you, Kambale, share a little bit in response and in reaction to what Myra just shared, which sounds like things that are happening in the Congo?
It's very tough to listen to Myra, because, as you say, you feel it, you know it. These are things that we've experienced. But one of the common denominator of what she shared that permeates around our countries is militarism, right? That we have soldiers who are trained in particular ways to commit human rights abuses, and sometimes they get promoted after they've committed these human rights abuses. So that brings us to Rwanda and the DRC. That since 1996, over 6 million Congolese people have died. They died due to 2 invasions in 1996 and 98 of US allies, Rwanda and Uganda. They invaded the Congo with the narrative that they were going after those who committed genocide in Rwanda. Somehow, they found themselves all the way up to the west. For the viewers who may not understand the context of what I'm sharing, so let me try to break it down a bit so you understand the geography of the Congo. Rwanda is a tiny country compared to the size of the Congo. Congo is the size of Western Europe. An invading force from the east came with the narrative of going after those who committed genocide in Rwanda, who, according to them, were living in the east, but somehow found themselves all the way to the west. It's like saying that the people who committed genocide are in Italy and you find yourself in Poland. How did that happen? What were you doing in Kinshasa, right, the capital city? Were you chasing those who committed genocide in Kinshasa, in the West, or not. And these invasions also saw how military forces on the ground went into the mines. They start extracting resources. They start displacing population for where the wealth is. We start seeing the attack on the population. I speak to one of the survivors, in the town of Kikyo. They round up the young boys, asked them to open their mouth. They were spitting in their mouth, rape the men, rape the women in public. What do they do so? This is to intimidate the population, to put fear into the spirit so that they leave the area. And so that also they don't have the courage to fight back. Right? But in the case of DRC, it's been going on for over 2 decades. And whenever I speak about what's happening in DRC, the millions of deaths, they're not dying just because they're bystanders. They're resisting as well. They understand the importance of protecting the land. So what is the narrative? Why are Congolese people dying? Why this genocide happening in DRC? It's simple: for the control of Congo's wealth. In 1996, large reserve of the mineral called coltan was found in the DRC. Coltan is a mineral that's found in virtually every electronic device: your cell phone, your laptop, your TVs, your microwaves, your inkjet printer. It's really central to the functioning of modern day technologies. So that was in 96 that large deposits were discovered. Then at the same time, we have these invasions and rebels going to those mines. The United Nations group of experts have documented in numerous reports the exploitation of Congo's minerals by its invaders. Right? In the case of Rwanda, there was a time in the early 2000s, where they were extracting hundreds tons of coltan out of the DRC and making profit, documented in UN reports. In the case of Uganda, the Congolese actually took Uganda to court. The Congolese government took the Ugandan to the International Court of Justice in 2005 for war crimes and crimes against humanity and the pilfering of Congo's resources. The ICJ ruled in favor of the DRC and ordered that Uganda pays over $10 billion of reparation. The case of Rwanda at the ICJ was rejected by the court for only one reason. The only reason the court rejected the case is because Rwanda has never signed to the Rome Treaty, so the ICJ does not have jurisdiction to try the crimes of Rwanda in the DRC. There is another country that has that too, the United States. They've never signed to the Rome Treaty. That's why some of the soldiers sometimes commit crimes around the world. It's hard to hold them accountable because the US is not party to the Rome Treaty. So the control of Congo's wealth, the displacement of population, and the targeting of Congolese population in areas that the UN mapping exercise report was able to show, explain and in plain terms why there is a genocide in the Congo. This report that I just mentioned, and I think that's where I will end, was published in 2010. The United Nations Human Rights Office in Geneva was tasked in the mid-2000s to start an investigation on the crimes taking place in the Congo. They wrote a over 500 pages report documenting crimes that have taken place in the Congo from 1993 to 2003, looking at human rights violation and violation of international humanitarian law. And in this report, they have implicated countries such as Angola, Uganda, and Rwanda. But it says something very particular in that report. In the UN mapping exercise report, it singled out the Rwandan military for committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possible genocide if proven in a competent court due to the massacre of civilians, Congolese and Rwandans alike. who were running from the war. So it was very targeted. The intention was direct, that there was an intent to eradicate that population. And that's been the struggle, and we feel encouraged when we see the struggle of the Armenians. For many years, since the early time of the last century, they've been fighting for the recognition that the Armenian people were targeted and killed. And today, the genocide of the Armenians is now internationally recognized. This is the same struggle that we are going through also with DRC. We know it's not even about a belief. We know genocide has taken place in DRC. And we are fighting until justice is served to the Congolese and that the world recognize that due to our people losing their lives, the world has benefited, but it must stop. It's not a historical situation. It is still going on up until today.
Thank you, Kambale. So just to really drive home the point, we know genocide has happened in the Congo, and those who continue to deny genocide are eventually, they're eventually going to lose the fight between the lies and the truth. And just for everyone that's watching that may be afraid to pronounce the words that genocide was committed in the Congo, I just want to encourage you, let you know, don't let the status quo tell you what to do and what to say, because we know when you know something, you have a responsibility, and there's no sense in pretending and changing and just finding different ways to wiggle your way out of the truth, because eventually the truth is going to take hold. At first they fight it, then they get really violent against it, and then eventually they will praise the truth and act like it was always a known truth. Don't be that person. Speak up and join the forces and the people who are pronouncing it and pursuing justice. Join the pursuit of justice. You cannot pursue justice for a genocide without calling it a genocide. You'll be pursuing justice for something different or something else. Let a spade be called a spade, and let the perpetrators be held accountable for the crimes that they committed. Let me turn it over to Myra to give some background, Myra, because a lot of the viewers may not be familiar with the Rohingya genocide. And I agree, both the Rohingya genocide not being recognized internationally or officially called a genocide, and the genocide that's taken place in the Congo by the Rwandan troops, by the way, led by Paul Kagame and his RPF party, cannot be reduced to not being genocides just because they're not called genocide. And it was great to see the Armenian genocide recognized as a genocide. But now we are in the pursuit of justice. Myra, can you give a little bit of background on what it is, this genocide has taken place with the Rohingya people, and also the larger issues in Burma, so that our audience understands and know what it is that we're talking about?
Okay, thank you. So, okay, I'll start off with giving you a little background about the overall, what's going on in the country, and paint it to Rohingyans so that you get a little bit idea. So, taking you back to 1948-49, when the end of the Second World War, and then Burmese gained independence from the British colonization. The people of Burma enjoy democracy for a little while, for a few years. But then started off from 1962 until 2010, the country was run by military dictators, the military junta. And then Burma again enjoys semi-democratic until last the end of January 31st, 2021. And so the first dictator ran the country from 62 to 88, and then the second dictator ran the country from 88 to 2010. During that time, the human rights abuses that I named some earlier, I mean, you name it, all the rights abuses has been happening in Burma. And that is why people were trying to looking for a safe place all across the country, fleeing. And that is why they had to move from one place to another in order to be able to survive. So if you cannot find a place to get to a safe place, then you won't be able to survive. And that is why I bring you back to my own personal story. I had to flee from one place to another to the point where I ended up reaching to the Thailand-Burma border, crossing over to Thai side in 1995. That's where I knew that my life was somewhat safer comparing to when I lived in my own country and in my own state. And so human rights abuses, mass atrocities, war crimes, crimes against humanity, which leads to potential genocide, has been going on for at least 70 years. Each ethnic group suffer the brutality at the hands of the Burmese military on daily basis until now as I speak. And I just wanted to take you quickly to the current situation, because the current situation is not far off from the past situation. Human rights abuses, the abuses are pretty much still the same. So Burma had the opportunity to enjoy semi-democratic reform from 2011 to 2021 January. And then when you came from 2021 February 1st, that's when the third time of the military coup took place in Burma. So today, as I speak, those in Kachin state, which is the northeastern of Burma, bordering with China, and the Karen ethnic group from southeastern Burma, bordering with Thailand. That's when the Burmese military increased military offensive on those two ethnic groups. So basically, they also dropping bombs, using airstrikes, fighter jets to drop bombs. And also they use drones in order to surveillance strategically, looking for places where the populations are, the civilians are, so that when they come to bomb, they have the proper target and then they get to kill to the maximum number. And that is why people are not able to live in their villages and have to live in jungle. I mean, we're talking about 2021, and the situation is still the same. And talking about other parts of the country, in Chin State, northern part bordering with India, as well as Shan State, eastern bordering with Thailand and somewhat China. That's also where the Burmese military use bombs in order to kill people in a larger amount. And taking you to the central Burma, started from February 1st. That was when the third military coup took place in my country. And to date, we have more than, okay, sorry, let me take you back. So the military coup took place, and then the people on the ground, they are not standing by and watching what's going on to them. And therefore, they get up, they protest, they make sure that their voices is heard. So we call them, this group of protesters, we call them civil disobedience movement, because, I mean, they just have to do something in order to fight back and to protect the people in their community to their best ability, but without no weapon. So we call them unarmed civilians who are fighting back. So, I mean, you can visualize, then the military has the guns and the the bombs and all kinds of sophisticated weapons that they use in the battleground, fighting the unarmed civilians. So to date, you have about over 760 people were killed. And then more than 4,600 people were arbitrarily arrested, and 19 of which were sentenced to death in a military tribunal. I mean, I couldn't even comprehend, like, people stand up fighting for their rights and they're sentenced to death when the perpetrators, the killers, walk around free. So that is where the situation in the country is very worrisome. And so this coup, this protest is different from other times before, is that the people in the whole country, they learn from each other, and then they stand up for each other in solidarity. So now you don't have the people in the central Burma fighting alone, but you also have the ethnic minorities around the country, across the country, are stepping up and fighting for each other. I know it's a lot, and it's a lot more to talk about, but I'll keep it right there for the overall picture, and then I'll bring you to the Rohingya situation right now, who are the Rohingya? Rohingya is another ethnic group among about 165 sub-ethnic groups in Burma. So they have been in Burma for generations, like every other ethnic groups, but they are still not recognized as the people of Burma. I mean, I just wanted to draw your understanding a little bit, considering, like, the African-American people, they were brought in from African, right, to use them as slaves. Or some of them later on came in as, I don't know, merchants or whoever, for business or for other mean for life. So as Rohingya, they came in, they live in Burma for generations. So you would think, now they've been here for all these times, they should already be the people of Burma, right? But no, they are not. Worse is the Constitution. So the law that they put in the Constitution that banned the Rohingya to become the people of Burma, which, well known, we usually call it the 1982 citizenship laws. That doesn't give the rights for the Rohingya to become the people of Burma, no matter how long they've been living there. So what's going on with them? They live in the country, but they're still stateless because they're not recognized by their own country government. So to date, we have majority of the Rohingya population that had to flee for lives and literally moving over to the Bangladesh side, because that's the closest border to where they are. So taking you the closest time would be back in 2017, around end of August, September. That's where the mass murder of the Rohingya took place. And in that very part of the year, I'd say less than between a week to a month, you have about 750,000 Rohingya who fled from Burma to the Bangladesh side. And we're talking about those who are alive and made it there. And then so many of them were killed. So I went through some of the reading from BBC last night. With that incident alone, 6,700 Rohingya killed, and 730 were children under 5. And they use all kinds of human rights abuses that we talked about earlier. Rape has been used. Children were literally taken from their mother's hands, threw into fire. So basically the babies burned to death. And then you have men were literally had to line up, and then they've been shot, and then before they've been shot, they had to dig their own grave, and then they'd be shot, and then they just kick into the hole, their grave. And the reason why I'm saying this, but what struck me and what hurts me so much is that these perpetrators get to do all these things with impunity. Nobody get punished. Nobody. And that is where we're trying to call on the international community to not to just condemn anymore. Condemn means nothing. I mean, just words. Condemns mean nothing. Here, we wanted to see the tangible result, and we've been calling for it. And UN Security Council hasn't done anything. And because of this, the perpetrators are emboldened because they never get punished. And I remember over 10 years ago when I still did advocacy at the UN, I remember meeting with Francis Deng's office. We talk about war crimes, crimes against humanity that leads to potential genocide. And then the office was telling me, oh, there was no genocide happening in Burma. And I was getting my head was like literally spinning in the meeting. I was just like, so if you don't call it genocide, so what do you call it? Well, seriously, I don't give a damn what you call it, but you have to do something about it. Or are you going to continue watching people die? And the room was quiet. But of course, the action is still not taken. So at this point, the Rohingya in Bangladesh, the refugee camps in Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar, there were over 1 million. So think about 1 million people in one single refugee camp, how crowded it is going to be. Some of them have to live on the ground in the slum where you cannot even walk on the ground because of the mud, because of the wet of the water and all this. And some of them were sent away to another island, a very remote island. It's called Basashar. It's like literally they are trying to take them there to create a new country for them because nobody lives there. So, but then you also have about another over 130,000 left over in Burma. They have no place to go. They are not allowed to live in their own community where they used to live, where they have their lives. They literally live in slums. I wish I brought some pictures for you guys, which I didn't think about it earlier. And they have no rights to education, no rights to health, no rights to mobilization, to go from one village to another or one city to another. And they don't even have the rights to marry to each other unless they get the authorization paper from the authority. So I guess you can imagine how a human can live in this world with that kind of life. I'll leave it there, and I'm ready for whatever question you may have.
Myra, this is so painful, but you are enlightening an audience that I believe is otherwise unaware of what is going on in Burma and the surrounding countries and to the Rohingya people. But many who are familiar with some of the conversations that we've had, whether it's on Rwanda or Congo or some of the other places, they've actually heard, these atrocities. And that's one of the things that unites us is the methods of the perpetrators are so similar. They're the same. And the more, the impunity, you talked about impunity. You talked about basically getting away with crimes and instead getting promoted. You talked about just the types of atrocities, what they do to the people, the restrictions they put on the people. And I know, Kambale, you spoke about the historical part of it, but there's also something similar going on in Beni. And I also saw someone asking, to speak about the Banyamulenge. There is so many things that are happening in the Congo that are similar to what we just heard from Myra. I want to shift the conversation a little bit, both from, we want to inform the audience, but we also want them to know what they can do, because y'all are doing some amazing work. The work that you're doing has awakened the world. I mean, Kambale, I remember you break the silence tours, back more than 10 years ago or longer. We're able to mobilize, multiple countries. Friends of the Congo mobilized over 50 countries, I believe, if I remember correctly. In Myra, the conversations you're talking about having at the UN, I remember when you were going through those, and the hypocrisy of people just denying these atrocities, denying that these are genocides that are taking place, and not doing something about it. So let's talk about what the people can do now that those who are in the power structure continue to refuse to do something about it. And sometimes in private, we'll admit that, yeah, this is genocide, but we just can't say it officially. What can those who are watching here, what can they do? And what more information can you give them about what's happening?
The question on genocide, the reason why there is a debate around it is, at least from what I've heard from a few lawyers, is the question of intent. They usually frame it as in this context. For genocide to exist, you must prove that the intent is to eradicate, in whole or in part, a particular population. Whenever the intent can be deferred to something else, it's no longer genocide. So they use the example in saying Hitler went after the Jewish people. He can't say that he killed the Jewish people because he wanted to get to copper in France to build cars, right? So whenever that intent change, it makes it in the legal framework hard to prove. But what we're discussing is not hard to prove. It's political, right? Myra has explained clearly the situation of a particular population targeted. In DRC, we've had multiple populations targeted, right? The UN mapping report only documents the crimes that took place from 1993 to 2003. And in the UN reports, the crime that they discuss that covers the genocide is the massacre in Tingitingi, the massacre of Hutu civilians, of Congolese and Rwandans in the refugee camp, where Kagame cannot say, Kagame, the president of Rwanda, he cannot say that the reason why these refugees were killed was that he was trying to get into a gold mine. He was trying to get into a diamond mine, or he was trying to get to coltan. The people who were killed in Tingitingi were killed because of who they were. That takes us to Beni. When we speak about the town of Beni, it's a town in North Kivu, where for almost a decade now, people are killed weekly. Right? We get the information. I'm actually from Beni. My family is from there. We get information all the time when the massacres are taking place. It's like continuous, right? The people of Beni are from a particular tribe. Right? You could say even at 100%, maybe it's an exaggeration, but I can say 95% of the population in Beni are Nande. Right? Nande are Congolese. They live in that area. They are massacred week after week. And the killing does not stop. The Congolese president just announced a state of siege, which is martial law in DRC, that was on April 30th. This will go on for 30 days with the hope of eradicating those who are committing these crimes. I mean, I'm looking forward to May 30th to see if his plan actually eradicated those. I'm counting. Our constitution says 30 days. So we'll see if in 30 days he's going to be able to achieve that. But it's very clear for the people in Beni to say that this is genocide because they are targeted. Week after week, massacre after massacre. So something can be said about in Kasai. 3 to 4 years ago, there was a massacre that took place in the Kasai region, Kamwina-Tsapu. During this massacre, the people who were killed also were particulars. So Congo, because of the aspects of the population of the country, 81 million people, over 400 ethnic tribes who have control of the land, and some of them, because of the way the conflict is, are being targeted because of who they are. We don't just have one genocide in the DRC, we have genocides. And then it becomes a challenge because when you call genocide, there are mechanism, legal mechanism, that has to now be enforced, right? We say never again in at the end of World War II, or 1945, right? How come after 1945 we have many ever again happening without stopping it, when we have now actually legal mechanism to do that? So powerful nations are now ready to enforce it. But the Armenians did not give up. The Armenians are showing us that it's actually possible. And talking to young Congolese, particularly young Congolese, there is a group of young Congolese in the UK and Belgium that I've been discussing with. They are lawyers, young Congolese student lawyers who are looking at this question. There are a few groups of Congolese organizing, COPAX, Conscience pour la Paix, Conscience Congolaise pour la Paix. They are also organizing. There are many different Congolese groups who are mobilizing where they are very clear that they want justice to come. And thanks to Dr. Mukwege, our Nobel Peace Prize, in 2018, he received the Nobel Peace Prize. He made a fantastic speech, spoke about the story of the Congolese women. Dr. Denis Mukwege is a Congolese gynecologist who worked in the East. He worked in a hospital called Panzi. He has treated many of the victims of the war, particularly the women. I mean, rape is used as a weapon of war, and due to the brutality of the rape, many women experience fistula. It's a destruction of their reproductive parts. And he pretty much saw women back together as a doctor. And he's done that for decades after decades. One time I was speaking with him, he shared, he gets tired of these praises when I say, thank you, doctor, for the great job. And he keeps seeing the same victims come back. Someone that he treated this year, she will come back the year after. He said at one point, he treated a baby, his mother, and the grandmother, all three in the same hospital. That for him as a doctor today, he is clear that the war must end, justice must be served, and he has called for the creation of the International Tribunal for Congo, which will use the UN mapping exercise report as the foundation for justice in DRC. And Congolese have joined that call to say that we want justice. We know genocide is happening. We want the legal mechanism to hold perpetrators accountable. And this international tribunal will be the framework. I will end by explaining this tribunal a bit from the why we need the International Tribunal for Congo. The crimes that's taking place in the Congo, some have been committed by Congolese. Some have been committed by multinational corporations. Some have been committed by foreign actors. Many of the foreign actors, particularly the Rwandan army and the Ugandan army, are not Congolese. Right? So we can have a tribunal in the DRC, but we need an international jurisdiction to allow to chase people such as James Kabarebe, the rebel without border, who fought in Uganda, who fought in Rwanda, who became the Congolese army.
Correction, Kambale, criminal without border.
Criminal without borders, fought in Uganda, fought in Rwanda, became a Congolese army chief of staff, and today is back in Rwanda as a military advisor to the president. Yet no one found it very strange. Maybe the viewers did not understand what I say. I have to step back again. There is a criminal without border by the name of James Kabarebe who must be tried in the International Tribunal for Congo. What has he done? He has killed people in Uganda. He has killed people in Rwanda. He has killed people in the Congo, and I've met a woman survivor who was raped by his soldiers in Kinshasa. I've met her, and she shared that story about what happened to her with those Rwandan soldiers commanded by James Kabarebe. And James Kabarebe, in 1997, became the Congolese Army Chief of Staff. Then went back to Rwanda, was a Minister of Defense in Rwanda, had other government position, and today is a Rwandan military advisor to President Paul Kagame. That's why we need the tribunal, so that we can bring people such as James Kabarebe and his crew, the Kayumba Nyamwasa, who in the documentary L'Afrique en Morceaux, he himself speaks about how they killed Rwandan refugees, and there were Congolese there too. He speaks about it in the documentary himself. You have others in Uganda, the different Uganda military soldiers and others. That's why we need that tribunal, because that's been the question. Why does the Congo need a tribunal? Isn't there already an ICC and others? No, we need a tribunal that's closer to the DRC to find the fact, that has international jurisdiction, so that we can send arrest warrants and bring them to trial in the DRC.
Does it need to be located in the DRC, the court, the tribunal?
There are discussions about where, right? The logical thing that will make sense is for it to be in DRC, but there are constraints, right? So what people are looking at now is, for example, the special court that's in Central African Republic. It's a mixed chamber court that seems to be working. There is also a context of the African Courts of Human Rights that's in Dakar, Senegal. This court tried Habré of Chad, right? Habré wasn't tried in Chad, it was tried in Senegal. So that's also another mechanism. But in the end, what do we need this tribunal? I mean, I was speaking with a Congolese lawyer who is, she's actually working in The Hague. She said that the situation in the Congo hasn't ended, right? People who are in these reports are still alive. The process of going through the UN mapping exercise report, I mean, the evidence exists, the information exists, but during the proceeding, we will have to go back to those mass graves that's all around the Congo. We know where they are.
Yeah.
But to do it outside of the DRC becomes very difficult to get the facts on the ground. So there is a debate, but the debate of how it's going to be is not primary. Primary first is there's no even recognizing genocide happening in the Congo. They do not even want the tribunal to happen. So we are mobilizing to create a political will for the tribunal to first exist. When it exists, we continue to put the pressure so that people of the Congo do feel justice. We've learned about the challenge of the International Tribunal for Rwanda that's in Arusha, where only one side of the story was heard. That's not what we want to see in Congo. We want to hear all the stories, right? We understand the challenges of the Gacaca trials in Rwanda. Great in principles, but how to allow everyone to mourn their family members, to tell the truth about what happened to them, right? And we see now the targeting of people who are against the government in Rwanda all around the world, being extradited, saying that they committed genocide in 1994 and others. That's a travesty of justice for some of the cases. So Congolese are studying all these situations and say, when we have our tribunal, we want to make sure that the victims are much more engaged in the tribunal. Not that they have to travel somewhere. We want to make sure that all the voices are heard, and we do not want the criminals of yesterday to be in our government. As I mentioned, James Kabarebe is an advisor to Paul Kagame in Rwanda. In the DRC, we don't want the rebels of yesterday to be in the government. They should not be engaged in public office because it's almost an insult to the victims who continue to see them on the TV screen or in parades after they've committed so many atrocious crimes. They must be held to account.
You keep talking about these three names, the James Kabarebe, who is an advisor to the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, who you also talked about. You talked about Kayumba Nyamwasa, who are the three most notorious genocidaires and war criminals in the Congo and the region. Of course, they also worked with former Congolese president Joseph Kabila. They were his bosses. That's the way I look at it. And Kambale, you are on mute. They were, to me, the three of them were his bosses, the three-headed monsters. And then you have others who are less known among these criminals without borders, like the General Charles Kayonga, who also was one of the sponsors, along with James Kabarebe and Jack Nziza, General Jack Nziza, who all these criminals without borders sponsored the M23 rebel group that ravaged the eastern part of Congo and displaced over 1 million people in the space of like 2 months, 2 or 3 months, if I remember correctly. And for me, as you said, they should not be awarded with these high positions. They should find themselves in courts. And that's why we have to keep the fight up, and we have to support the efforts that you and other Congolese are leading and Dr. Mukwege is leading to get justice, to get these courts set up, to get the indictments out and arrest these criminals without borders. It was very, it was great news for me to see Hissène Habré of Chad, who committed atrocities in Chad, tried in Senegal, and he left court kicking and screaming. The opportunity that he never gave to his victims. But we want to give these guys the opportunity to actually go to court and clear their names. And we know they can't, because actually the reason why I'm speaking on, you talked about Kayumba Nyamwasa bragging about what they did in the Congo. And also James Kabarebe, he's also in that film, Afrique à Morceaux. For those who haven't seen it, check out the film, Afrique à Morceaux. This film has these guys basically confessing to what they did. They're bragging about what they did because they were powerful at the time. There's also a speech by Paul Kagame in April. It was on April 13th, 2010. This was probably just a little bit before you got poisoned, Kambale, in 2010. Paul Kagame said, we went to the Congo, we killed those we wanted to kill, and we repatriated the ones we wanted to repatriate. These are things that Paul Kagame has said himself. We have speeches by James Kabarebe, we have speeches by Kayumba Nyamwasa, we have speeches by others, like General Muganga Mubarak, another Rwandan general who's known for some of the massacres where he's used poison on children and things like that. So the type of atrocities that Myra's talked about, all of these perpetrators must be brought to justice. And they think that they can get away with it, but we're gonna make sure that we speed up the process of getting them to these courts. And that requires an effort by a lot of us. To get this political will that you're talking about requires an effort by all of us. It needs to be done in solidarity. We need to make this a global issue. And that's why we continue to do this. And we continue to make the world aware, because the world must know so that the world can take action. And want to continue to encourage and ask everybody that's following to get engaged, to get involved, raise awareness, push for these tribunals. And also, Myra, not to forget about you, I want you to talk about the efforts that you've the work that you've been doing with the U.S. campaign for Burma, which you guys have done amazing. I've seen results of your work. It's a lot of work. It's hard work, but it's rewarding. And I've seen what you've been able to do. I would like for you to share with the audience. I've also seen you doing community education, which I've also seen, Kambale do, which, these are really important things to do. And that's what we're continuing to do also with these platforms. Can you share some of the work that you're doing so that these perpetrators can be brought to justice for Burma, and what kind of solidarity we can build with us from the African continent, the Congolese and the Rwandans and others all over the world, because this is not a local issue, it's a global issue.
Sure, thank you. Before I go any further, I wanted to remind all of us, is that doing advocacy, activist work is not a shortcut way of achieving our goal. And I wanted all of us to be mindful of that, because we also have some people who think that, okay, they go out for a protest one time, they don't see the result, and then they get upset. Or some of them, they think, okay, if we go out and protest, that is more effective than we do letter writing or petition or creating this kind of talk platform so that we can educate other people. Or some of them think that they're already experts when they don't even know the basic information about the issues they are going to talk about. So I just wanted to say that educating oneself is very important, because that's where you get your talking points, right? And then from there, you educate others. But what we do at the U.S. campaign, we work in a couple different levels. We're trying to do basic advocacy training in order to educate our community to be able to understand what is the meaning of advocacy. How do you do it? Why are you doing it? How long it might take you to get there, those kind of stuff. But at the same time, we also work with friends across the globe who ever we have the communication with, to making sure we share information, we share solidarity, and we support each other. So that doesn't mean that it has to be only Burmese community. It doesn't matter whichever community, as long as we can agree upon the issues we are working together. That is very important, that we support each other. And also we work with the community to advocate their government officials, for instance, in the US, where they can call up their senators, representatives, they can write to them, or sometimes we as the US campaign also trying to draft the letter and encourage the diaspora to sign on. So for instance, started from the beginning of February, the coup started off back in Burma. Collectively, we wrote 2 letters to President Biden. And also, of course, so many other letters also came. But what I wanted to say is that, yes, the work is tedious, but at the same time, it is paid off in a slower time. Because within the past 2 to 3 months, we can see the Biden administration put up many different pieces of sanctions, economic sanctions, sanctioning the generals, the top generals, the dictators and their family, their cronies, their businesses, and also their biggest places where the money came in, like the oil and gas, the natural resources, because those are the resources that they steal from the people, from the civilians, and making it into their own wealth. So now the Biden administration is sanctioning those big companies. Of course, it doesn't really take any effect yet, but we're hoping that it'll take effect and it'll cut off some of the income for the military so that they don't have the means to pay their troops. And of course, then the troops also will be coming up where they cannot work for the military anymore because they don't get paid. So we're hoping that we're getting somewhere closer to some result that we're looking into. But also at the same time, we are trying to work on in order to bring about justice and accountability for the people on the ground. So the reason why I'm saying advocacy is a slow process in order to get to the point where we want it to be is that so if you notice back in 2000, is it 2 years ago? I can't believe I forget this. So there was huge, 2019. That's when we, at The Hague, we had the Gambian, the little countries that was strong enough to bring the Burmese military to the International Criminal Court of Justice on the atrocities, crimes against the Rohingya minorities in Burma. And also, at that very same time, we also had the how do they call it? I forgot the word. I'm sorry. So it's not just the ICJ, but also the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is also open to the investigation regarding crimes against humanity and war crimes. And on top of that, we also have the Argentina, who also opening the case in order to bring about justice for the Rohingya, because the crimes is very dense, very terrible, and here somebody has to do something. So the organization, like the Burmese Rohingya organization UK, they worked with Thomas Ohiya Kitana, who used to be the Burmese the special human rights. Oh my gosh, I don't really know why I cannot say this stuff anymore.
Is the human rights envoy
on human rights in Burma? Sorry, and so they team up, and then they brought the case of Burma to the Argentina court as well. So I just wanted to give you the gist of the value of doing advocacy. It's going to come. It's going to be slow sometimes, and sometimes it's going to come faster than we wanted to, or slower than we wanted to. But I wanted to say that don't give up, and don't think that, okay, this is it. It's not happening, so I'm going to do other things. Because if you're thinking that way, then what about the people on the ground who put their lives in the line every day? This is their only way to bring about change in the country. And we, the ones who have the possibility, the freedom, the safety, wherever we are, the only thing is we have to amplify their voices. And that is very important, that we all do it together collectively. And I love the event like this, where I get to learn about your side of stories that I probably don't have enough time to read. So your information is very informational for me, and tells me that that is another thing that I also can do for your side of the world. Whereas you are learning the same thing from me when you can also speak out on behalf of the people, the Rohingya, as well as the people of Burma, because as we said earlier, we share humanity. Our world is not in peace yet. And it is our responsibility to bring about world peace. And who would be able to do the work better than you and I? But we have to take this as some level of responsibility. Otherwise, it'll be like, okay, I do it when I wanted to do it, and I don't do it when I don't want to do it. The most important thing is to making sure that we amplify the voices, and to making sure that we create that political will in the policymakers.
Thank you, Myra, for especially my biggest takeaway here is don't look for shortcuts when you're doing advocacy. Do not look for shortcuts when you're doing activism. There is no pill. There is nothing that you're gonna go to the store, like say a Walmart or some store anywhere, and just pick up a box that says, oh, here's the solution, and you're good. No, it takes work. It takes steps. And if you skip a step, like anything of value, do not cut corners when you're doing something, like anything, it's just like anything else that brings you value. It takes consistency, it takes work, it takes determination, and it also takes humanity. And you just have to take the steps forward every time. Just like, you know, the saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. You cannot skip a step. If you skip a step, you're not going to make 1,000 miles. You know, you have to take every step. So the other thing that I understood is that solidarity works. Like the example you just gave of the Gambia, there's actually a question that came through Facebook from Kristen Allen, who spoke about that and said, we saw how Gambia was able to bring a case against Burma for genocide at the ICJ because of the Rohingya flows into Bangladesh, who is signatory to the Rome Statute. Do you think a similar approach for what happened, what they did, could be used in the Congo in order to bring perpetrators to justice? So what you just shared here is also opening our eyes to some of the things, like I wasn't aware that the Gambia is the one that actually brought this forward. You just talked about the example of Argentina. And I know with our ability to connect with so many countries around the world, we can find allies that would actually be able to bring about these, you know, this type of progress. You know, like I said earlier, when we were doing the Break the Silence tour, you know, Congo, Friends of the Congo had already mobilized over 50 countries. And I'm sure there are multiple countries that are signatory to the Rome Statute that could provide another mechanism to put pressure on these international institutions so that we can bring about the political will that you talk about. The other thing you talked about is community education, people knowing and understanding the importance of knowing what you're doing and knowing that you cannot cut corners. So Kambale, before you speak on this mechanism, and I want to bring in the audience and take in some of the questions and comments. There was a reaction by R. Verite saying that what Myra experienced, your story, Myra, which is very, very touching and difficult to listen to. Every time, I've heard it many times, but it's still difficult to listen to. They say that it's so similar to Rwandans and Congolese experiences, and no child should experience such things. And then there was another comment by Chance Mumvaneza saying, imagine that Kagame impunely killed Rwandans and Congolese, millions, and no one is talking about it. Congolese civilians are being butchered and the president is quiet about it, seriously. And I think that we are speaking about it. We need everybody to join in and speak about this thing, right? And then there's more from Leticia Lumembo. The world must know all these atrocities. Agreed. Raise awareness so that people can take action. There's Mireille Abewe. Shout out to you, Mireille. Thank you for joining us. Says unbelievable. Thank you for enlightening us. Where is the never again that the world promised? And so, Kambale, let's shift over to more solidarity and understanding what the Gambia was able to do, for example, and what Myra is talking about, building coalitions and bringing people together. And also back at the work that, you know, you've done, and, you know, your Congolese and, you know, Friends of Congo have done to mobilize around the world. The prospect of what can we achieve with more solidarity, and also this aspect of not cutting corners that Myra spoke about.
Solidarity is happening. It just needs to be amplified. I'll speak about a comrade. You know, while I'm speaking about the DRC, my heart is heavy. My heart is heavy because one of my comrades in South Africa is in jail. His name is Bonono, Comrade Bonono of Abathali Bas Mjondolo. It's a social movement in South Africa with over 85,000 members. He's been arrested on false charges. saying that he was trying to commit murder. I mean, it's a ridiculous charge. But why am I bringing his name? Right? I've been with him around the world in a few places. In the evening, we'll sit down and talk. We talk about South Africa, share about Congo. And I came to know something that I knew already before, that his organization helped Congolese in South Africa, particularly around the xenophobic attacks when it was happening. So I knew the story, but he helped shed more light for me to know what they actually did. So when migrants in South Africa were being attacked in the press, it seems that all South Africa has gone crazy. That's not true, right? That there were South Africans actually protecting the migrant, and the ABM was one of the organizations doing that. They will literally go to the homes of Congolese in South Africa, in different parts of sometimes Yeoville or Cape Town, different areas. They will sleep outside their house and stay there for days and weeks until those who wanted to harm Congolese were gone. These are South Africans, right, who did that, right? So me hearing that story of solidarity, that the movement understood that while they are fighting for the land, control of the land in South Africa, we have migrant workers here who are under attack. The enemy has confused people to think that we are our own enemies, but we'll protect our brothers and sisters. So me hearing that he's in jail, I'm making sure that people know his story, know the story of Habalali Basmujondolo, the work they are actually doing in South Africa, and remind us that solidarity exists. How do we now amplify that? Let people know that there are, you're saying 50s, over 60 countries and 400 universities globally since 2008 who have participated, organized Congo Week in the specific countries and communities. There have been ordinary people organizing and helping us organize for justice. Comrades, you remember CMU, shame on you.
CMU, shame on you. Yes, I remember that.
Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. Carnegie Mellon University invited President Paul Kagame to speak. The students themselves, the community in Pittsburgh, mobilized their own communities, Congolese and Rwandans, to make sure that when Paul Kagame of Rwanda comes to the university, they get to see us. They get to see our discontent. So those stories, that's what we have to share.
And shout out to Kambale. Apologize, but I have to interrupt and give a shout out to those students and professors on that campus for the work that they did. And they provided a template for other campuses because Yale did the same thing. Students and professors at Yale did the same thing. And hopefully the students at Harvard and these other universities that are inviting Kagame will do the same. Please proceed. Yes, just shout out to them.
Definitely. I think on the solidarity, the point that I really wanted to make, solidarity happens. We need to amplify the stories, share the stories so people know that we are not alone. Because people don't know, right? When people know that there are those who are giving their homes for people to sleep while we travel, people who are giving up resources. I mean, sometimes even like people in the Congo who are in need are contacting us for support and say, hey, wait a minute, you are the one actually, you need support. But to hear that story that someone in Congo is willing to financially support the work that we are doing globally is definitely humbling. But I want to touch on two questions that I think is important to address. One was a question on the situation of Banyamulenge, and the last one around Kunda. Where is Laurent Kunda Batware, who has committed crimes in the DRC? I think this is a very important question. You say I'm Congolese. I believe I'm an internationalist, a Marxist, a Pan-African activist who believe in humanity. So I'm not going to box myself in the discussion of ethnicity and what is actually happening, right? Remember when I spoke about Beni, I mentioned that in Beni, there are people Wanande, who are Congolese who are being targeted. And then I spoke about Kasai. The question of Banyamulenge is important, and specifically around Kunda. And I'll speak about what happened in the past 2 to 3 years. There is a random criminal without border named Kayumba Nyamwasa, who has joined a political party apparently, named the RNC. And he also has a rebel group operating in the DRC. Right? That rebel group, I believe they call it P5. I don't know what the P stands for. He actually, of course, he has officially with the UN report, he has denied the allegations, right? So we'll say that these are allegations that has been documented in the UN group of experts to report that yes, there is an ongoing recruitment of rebels in the community around Mulenge to launch attacks on Rwanda. And this P5 is directly connected to Kayumba Nyamwasa, right? Who's one of the rebels without borders. So what's happening in that area? Who are the population there? Unfortunately, the population in the area are the Banyamulenge, who through the course of our history in the DRC, unfortunately have been instrumentalized by Paul Kagame of Rwanda. They do have legitimate claims at times around oppression that's taking place. But how do you explain that a young man named Bizi Makara, who's from the community, became a rebel with the Rwandan forces, and no one is holding him accountable?
Yeah, the RCD, right?
And the AFDL
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yes, that's right. He's also in the film, Africa Morceau.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
and when they talk about negotiating and Kabila going to meet, yeah.
Indeed, right? So, and you also have Deogracias Bugera, so you can name the names. And that's why also for Paul Kagame, I don't spend time saying that Paul Kagame is Tutsi. Paul Kagame could care less if he's a Tutsi or not. Paul Kagame is a criminal. And
Kambale, we also could care less if he's a Tutsi or not. He is a criminal. just to drive home the point. We don't care what ethnicity he is.
And the time I understood the mafia network that's happening in DRC was thanks to an American lawyer. We were working on a case, on a few cases against the Rwandan regime, building the case and so on. And one day in the office, she said, Kambale, I got it. And I said, what do you mean? What's going on? I said, I understand what's happening in the Congo. And then she asked me, have you watched the movie Godfather? And at the time, I never seen the movie, right? Then I responded, no, I have not seen the movie. So she told me, you gotta go watch it, and tomorrow we are going to discuss. So that night I watched all 3 parts because I was curious to find out what this American lawyer is going to share with me. After I came back to the office the next day, she asked me my thoughts, I shared my views, and then she started breaking it down as a lawyer because she was an expert in the RICO Act, right? A RICO Act is a law that was introduced to stop the mafia in the United States, right? And she explained, she says, when we speak about the mafia, people think of Italy, right? Italian mafia. But she said, they're not Italians, right? There is a criminal in Sicily who's connected to another criminal in the Bronx, who's also connected to another criminal in Las Vegas. And they are particular families. They have multiple passports. Some of them may have French passport. Some of them may have Italian passport. Some of them may have US passport, right? So they don't even have allegiance to the Italian government, to the French government, or to the US government. The allegiance that they have is the criminal network they've built. And so the reason the US had a huge problem with that was the whole notion of these are Italians. But when they started understanding it and found that it was very difficult to catch a mafia leader for killing, well, they said, well, you can catch the accountant because they have money that's showing up that's not justified. So they start going after the accountants. after the drivers and introduce these strong laws so that when the accountant or the driver get arrested, they are able to provide information around the network. Most of the mafia leaders in the United States, and that's what she told me, were not arrested because they killed someone, but they were arrested for tax evasion and were able to create the racketeer system to show what they were doing for that, and now add the crimes. When she explained it, we've been working on the case. We can't wait for Kagame to be in jail because we know the criminal network that is built of Kayumba Nyamwasa, of James Kabarebe, of all the names, Jangsis and others. At one time, they were Ugandans. Then they became Rwandans. In the case of James Kabarebe, he became Congolese. So if you ask James Kabarebe, what is your citizenship? Is he going to say he's Ugandan, Rwandan, or Congolese? They have no allegiance to the ethnicity, but then they have used the ethnic affiliation across the region for sympathy. And unfortunately in DRC, that unfolded. So for me, the question of Banyamulenge is very simple. Congo has 400 ethnic groups, right? And all ethnicities in the DRC are oppressed. We know who our oppressor is. Right? We know that Uganda and Rwanda have invaded the Congo. We understand the weapons proliferation. How do weapons end up in the Congo? How we are instrumentalized in the DRC. Different groups, it's not just that, right? There are other groups also who are. And that goes now to Kunda. Laurent Kunda Batware in 2009, who I tried to expose him very loudly during the time, he would say that he was fighting for an ethnic minority. And then in the same sentence of him saying that he's fighting for an ethnic minority in DRC, he will say he wants the Congolese government to renegotiate the Chinese contract. So in my head, I'm confused. I say, are you fighting for an ethnic minority or you are fighting for the Congolese government to renegotiate the Chinese contract? What? And he committed many crimes before 2009, right? In 2004, in Bukavu and so on. And whenever he was stopped in 2009 during the CNDP rebel group uprising, he has been residing in Rwanda up until today. There's been requests to send him back to the DRC, and the Rwandan government responded, if I'm not mistaken, saying that Congo has death penalty, so they don't feel comfortable sending him back to the Congo. Right? So in terms of those who are committing the crimes, let's not get stuck in trying to figure out which tribe they are from, which ethnicity they are from. They use it for the benefit when it's needed. Let's call a spade, as you say when we first began the show. When we're dealing with the crimes, just as we say in the UN Mapping Exercise Report, we documented from 1993 to 2003, we documented the killing in the Kasai, in the Katanga region, where Congolese in Katanga killed other Congolese in Kasai. That's in the report. So it's not just Rwanda that's in that report, right? It's the killings of Congolese, the killings of foreign forces, and so on. And let's make sure that anyone, the 400 ethnic groups, including the Banyamulenge, all of them who have revendication, bring it to the court. Bring the perpetrator of these crimes also, so we see them, we try them, we give them the opportunity, as you say, that they never gave the victims. They killed the victim. But we give them the opportunity, come and clear on them. Let's have the tribunal. Let's hold the perpetrators of the crimes accountable.
Yep, I agree. And my response is always, to the question of the Banyamulenge is, we advocate for peace and justice in the Congo. We advocate for apprehension of the perpetrators and bringing them to justice. And that includes every person in Congo. That's everybody, including the Banyamulenge. So it looks like we can now shift to, I did want to, we've got a little bit of time left, but we need to wrap this up. The role of the international community, in all of this, both politically and economically, militarily, because I think there's a major role that's played by especially Western powers, the US, the UK, France, Canada, and a bunch of others that are really, really fueling these conflicts. And want to talk about that, and maybe as we just start to wrap it up. And Myra, before I come to you, just want to also acknowledge a couple of things from the audience, where Kagoma Egle is saying that it is good that you bring this activism and solidarity. I've found in you all a strong desire to advocate for justice and put an end to impunity and liberate Africa from the greedy grasp of the West. The unity and solidarity in action is more than ever needed. Keep in mind of the French-speaking African activists and men called out Kemiseba and Nathalie Yamb. So I think our solidarity is actually going beyond the borders of the African continent. And I'm glad about what you said, Kambale, because we don't care about these borders. We don't care about this ethnicity, these ethnic groups. We care about people. And before we are a part of these ethnicities, before we are confined to these borders, we are human beings. We speak for human beings. We don't speak for, a border or a territory, or, as soon as we cross the border and there's an atrocity, that we just say, oh, no, it's okay. It's happening somewhere else. That's not what we do. So let's talk about the international community, Myra and Kambale, as we wrap this conversation up. Myra, could you talk about basically the involvement of the international community, or Kambale, you can go first. Either one of you can go first and talk about both the international community and then the potential, the power that the people who are watching this have, the power that we have, how powerful we are in terms of actually changing the tide, looking at examples like the end of the transatlantic slave trade, looking at things like apartheid, South Africa, looking at the fight that you were involved in, Myra, to free Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma, who of course came on, was in my opinion a disappointment, but it was great to at least have a change from military rule to her, and then now she's been ousted. But let's talk about this, the attitude of the international community in these two places, and what we can do and what the viewers can do to change that attitude. Kambale and Myra.
I think I'll start. I would like to hear Myra close, because as I said, the issues in Burma is something that's dear to all of us. And we have to continue to figure out how to unite the struggles. There is a war. The war is a war between the international community and the international solidarity. These are two things. I like to separate that. So when I hear international community, I always think about the 5 permanent members of the Security Council who chooses to move whenever it's needed. But when we speak about international solidarity, I'm talking about the people who, when they heard Patrice Lumumba, that he was assassinated, went out to the UN. February 15, 1961, African Americans living in Harlem organized a protest and were able to get into the UN, into the Security Council meeting, shouting at the US ambassador, murderer, who was in that room, Maya Angelou, Amiri Baraka, Max Roach, and others who mobilized to be in that space. I'm thinking about the people in Singapore who organized a protest in 1961 of hundreds of thousands. I'm not saying 1,000, 5,000, 50,000. I'm saying over 100,000 Singaporeans were in the streets denouncing the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And we can use more and more examples of international solidarity. The international community, in the case of the DRC, is guilty. Is guilty because they will never have the opportunity to deny that they did not know what's happening in DRC. They have enough information that they themselves, through international mechanisms that they have, such as the World Bank and IMF, such as the United Nations, they have the information about the killings, the murders, the exploitation of resources that's happening in the DRC. They chose to remain silent. So why are they silent? They are silent because they hope the citizens of their countries will not know what's happening in the DRC. And that's the task that we have, of building international solidarity so that no official anywhere can run away from the question, what are you doing about the genocide in the Congo? How do we build that consensus? We started it in 2008 through Breaking the Silence Congo We campaign. Is the initiative is to mobilize ordinary people around the world to be at the side of the Congolese, as Patrice Lumumba said, and continue to ask those questions. The fact that now we are talking about the International Tribunal for Congo shows progress. Took 20 years, but it shows that we are getting somewhere. But how to continue to do that? Corporations have a role. That's why I love the UN Mapping Exercise report, because it's not just talking about Rwanda, Uganda, and other forces. It also talks about the multinationals, saying that the multinationals are liable for aiding and abetting war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide in the DRC. So they are also guilty, and we know we have to go after them. We have to now also look at now these governments, why with the information that they have, that they continue to support these dictators. They continue to support Museveni. They continue to support Kagame. In which way? They train their militaries. They provide them with military equipment. They allow them to be in UN missions. Can you imagine that the courts in Spain, right? A judge in Spain, in the court that tried Pinochet of Chile, they have 40 arrest warrants on Rwandan generals. And some of these generals have been on UN missions.
Yeah. General Kazura and Kazura and Patrick Nyamvumba both have been on UN missions. I believe there is one more. Oh, Karenzi Karake. General Karenzi Karake has also been on UN missions.
So how is it that the UN has the so-called largest UN peacekeeping forces in the DRC? They have UN reports documenting the crimes of these soldiers. There is an international arrest warrant of 40 Rwandan generals. Yet the permanent members of the Security Council, they can stop this nomination, still allow criminals to be leading UN peacekeeping missions, right? So we see that these foreign governments, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, have been complicit in the genocide. And I can explain also why they do not want to recognize it. Because that will be the question, how come for 20 years you knew this was happening and you didn't do anything? And we will not allow them to say what Bill Clinton said in 1998 in Rwanda. Bill Clinton said that he did not know what was happening in Rwanda in 1994. But we will not allow it now that for them to say the same thing. So the international community is guilty. We need international solidarity to build the political will to hold them accountable for the crimes of silence and the crimes of aiding and abetting those who are committing atrocious human rights abuses.
Thank you, Kambale, for that. As you said, we will give no excuses. Many people, both within the power structures and ordinary people, a lot of ordinary people don't know. Genuinely, they do not know. Bill Clinton claimed he didn't know, but he did. Today, what we do is to make sure that no one ever comes back with this excuse of, I did not know, we did not know, both in terms of the officials, but also the ordinary people, you, the audience, the viewers, who have the power to actually push and change this political will. And I think looking at so many movements around the world, you can tell it's all about the people. What the people do is what pushes the will of the politicians, the will of the power structure. And this is how systemic change comes about. It comes through the people. It comes through people like you, ordinary people like us, and shining a light on it is really important. And Myra, I wanted to bring it to you so you can bring it home, as you started it so well with your testimony, which again, anybody that's missed this part, that missed Myra's testimony, please go back and to the beginning and listen to her testimony. Myra, what about you in terms of the international community and international solidarity? Because I can kind of guess why you decided to move, shift your work from the UN, from lobbying and pushing the UN to getting the people to actually move and do something. But can you share with the audience?
Well, not much. I will just build on what you said. The most important thing we need to understand is our voice, our voices is more important than anything else. Why I say that is because if you are suffering a pain and if you don't talk about it, how would your doctor know your pain? So that pain, we know the pain better than anybody else. Speak it the way you think is necessary. If you have to scream your head off, just do it. It's fine. If you have to cry, just do it. Fine. Your voice is important. I cried enough times. Even earlier, I spoke with you guys. It was so painful, but I had to let it out so that you know. So it is very important for all of us to know and to understand is that our voices have the power, but we have to let it out. That's very important. One time is not enough. 10 times is not enough. We have to do it until we get to the point where we are. Going back to the international community, I call that bloodsuckers, because when they wanted something from your country, they come in and they suck at anything they want. For instance, in Burma, they come in, they take away our natural resources, oil and gas, timber, gems, stones, and all this stuff to enrich themselves as well as to enrich the Burmese military. What about the people? The people are nothing, but apparently the people are who maintain those ground in order for these natural resources to be preserved. So you have the voice again. And we're talking about earlier solidarity. And I remember Kambale talking about military training, countries outside of our country providing military equipment. Likewise, in Burma, who empower, who give all these killing weapons to the Burmese military. You name it, we have it. The closest is China, Russia, India, Thailand, Japan. They sell all kinds of sophisticated weapons and drones and all this stuff, but also giving them very advanced military trainings just for the sake of to kill people, and then they can come and get whatever they want. So the bottom line, what I wanted to say is just make sure you speak out and make sure your voices are heard, because a lot of times, those who in power will, and most of the time, if not all the time, side with the people that they can get the most out of the people who are in power. Giving the very quick example, with the Burmese government and the US government in the past decade. We have our government officials in the US here that only listen to one person in Burma, with ignoring the voices of the people on the ground. Because back in 2013, 12, 13, 14, we, the advocates, both on the ground, the civil society organization, the community-based organization, we here outside, giving all the warning signs to the past administration that don't leave the leverages out yet, because the situation on the ground is still unpredictable. We wanted to making sure we see the tangible result. Well, because of that, one person started speaking out and saying, okay, this thing can be done, this thing can be done. So she was heard and we were not heard. So now we're back to square one. Yes, we're back to square one. So that is why one may think that our voice is not loud enough, but remember, together we're stronger. So let's come and put together our voices. Now we're not just talking about Burma. We're not talking about Rwanda. We're not talking about the Congo, just the three of us, because we're good friends. But we're talking about collectively across the globe. Together, we can make a difference. And if we are going to put that word never again into reality, this is the moment for us to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Myra. I don't know if I have anything else to add to what you and Kambale just said. And in calling for every voice counts, every 2 feet counts, everybody counts. And we are counting on you to take action. As Myra said, they may not listen to the people in Burma, but they will. And this is let's speak about if the U.S. government or the multinationals and these other companies may not listen to the people in Burma, but they will listen to us because we are citizens, tax-paying citizens in this country. We can push them. We can push them. They won't just listen. We will have to push them. As consumers, they will have to listen. And so, as someone said about the French-speaking activist, Camille Seba likes to say, if ils n'iront pas comprendre, they will eventually get it. We will make sure, we will make them get it. But it requires and it takes everybody's voice. It takes your voice, it takes my voice, it takes Kambale's voice, it takes Myra's voice, and it takes everybody's voice. And with that, I wanted to thank you both for your insights, for your testimonies, for your humanity, and for your work, for everything that you do. And now you've inspired a lot of people around the world over the years. This I know because I've seen it. I've seen y'all in action and really appreciate the work that you do, not only for the people in Congo, in Rwanda, in Burma, but around the world. And let's continue to build this solidarity. Also, I want to thank our sponsors, Black Star News, Friends of the Congo, Aglan, and HMG Network. Unless you guys have anything else to add, I would like to just turn it over to Freeman Bikorwa Singirangabo to close out this broadcast, but I'll give you 1 minute if either one of you would like to add anything else as we close, and then Freeman will come in and close it out for us. Okay, I think we are all set then. Freeman and the studio, thank you for giving us the space. Thank you for the platform. And we ask everybody that followed this broadcast to share it widely so that the world knows, because the world must know. The world must be aware, and we all must take action. Thank you again. Freeman, over to you.
Cllaude, thank you. Thank you so very much for this power-packed message of in pursuit of justice. Thank you, Myra. This has been it's been an amazing story that you have shared with us. Kambale, as always, comrade, thank you so much for such an enriched conversation and power-packed message that you continue to push out. I also want to ask all of you, let's put this unrecognized genocide of Burma, Rohingya, and the Congo on the map. We really don't need the Security Council to accept what we already know. Death is death. When someone dies, whatever you call it, as Myra had said, it doesn't matter. Bottom line, people are dying in mass. And we must not just be bystanders and do nothing. We have to take action more than ever. Let's be as many as Cllaude Gatebuke. Let's be as many. Let's be as many as Kambale. Until we get it all done, we cannot stand by. And with that, I give thanks to all of you. And again, I want to thank all our sponsors, Black Start News, Friends of the Congo, and the African Great Lakes Action Network, of course, with HMG Network for making this broadcast happen. We are going to have far more impactful conversation, far more broadcasts related to our business as a people. Every Saturday, we are going to have something that is enriching, that is of touching, and that just talk about you, the people, not the criminals without borders. And with that in mind, thank you so very much for following our broadcast. And it's Freeman here at HMG Network. And I tell you, all of you guys, to have a super fantastic days, as we always say. Until next time.